you can improve your mitochondria, which is the little energy powerhouses of each cell, through lifestyle, like weight training, high intensity exercise, sauna, cold plunge, intermittent fasting. I wouldn't recommend Ambien or any prescription medications. Studies have shown people who take Ambien have shorter lives. Around this time, the American Heart Association was formed, and they got a very large donation from Procter & Gamble at the time. And the arrangement was such that, could we say that vegetable oils are heart healthy, and that it truly is the saturated fat and that it is the cholesterol. And this is maybe around 1960.
Today I have Dr. William Bruno, a top plastic surgeon in West Hollywood. We are going to tell you everything you need to know about longevity, wellness, anti-aging in conjunction with plastic surgery. Welcome back to my channel. I'm JoAnna Pallante. I'm a mom and entrepreneur, and I have a passion for holistic living. So as a fitness-minded person, I know you like the Gary Brecka, some of his aminos, and those are kind of going beyond the basics, like the vitamin D and the things that we've talked about. So why do you like that brand? Or I can tell you've been in the gym, like looking good. So you're obviously a true testament to somebody who's doing the work and using the supplements. So why that brand in particular are you kind of...
You know, I think it's a good brand. It's Perfect Aminos. There's another brand that's called Kion, K-I-O-N. They're essential amino acids, which I probably started taking maybe 8 or 9 months ago. I like to do a lot of fasting, like intermittent fasting. So in a fasted state, I think it's good to have more amino acids in your bloodstream. It helps prevent muscle protein breakdown. So I'll usually take that in the morning on an empty stomach, and I'll take it right before I work out. And being mostly plant-based, it is harder to get sources of protein, so I do rely on that. I do think in general people should get most of their nutrients from whole foods, but you know, as we mentioned earlier, the soil isn't great anymore, so you're not actually getting all the nutrients that we once needed, let's say magnesium, calcium, other things. So I do think there's a role for that, but I am a big advocate of, essential amino acids. You know, do you have to take them 3 times a day? I don't know, but maybe once a day, kind of filling in, or if you know you're not going to be eating for a while, I think it's nice to take a dose of it, because it prevents the muscle protein breakdown, which is sort of constantly happening, especially if you sleep and you wake up in the morning. And I think that's something most people could add to their routine, especially people who are on the weight loss injection medications, because they don't have much appetite. Right. So you can drink that as a liquid or take a pill. And
there's been a lot of talk recently about some of these kind of outside of the box supplements, or I don't even know if supplements are the right word, but I just recently got an IV of NAD+, which I had never heard of. And then I've been taking glutathione. Is that how you say it?
Glutathione.
Glutathione, yeah. Right. It's a tongue twister for me. But I was reading that might get banned. I guess it's kind of controversial right now. There was some, stuff I saw on Instagram scrolling. People were saying that there's talk about that not being easily accessible anymore. So what's your take on those? Are they beneficial? Do you have to be careful about where you source them from?
Yeah, I mean, all the supplements in general, none of them are regulated. They're not FDA approved. So I think everyone should know that. Try to find a good third-party sort of certified brand, and there are several out there. But glutathione is sort of the master sort of antioxidant in the body. A lot of people will take it. I think orally, it doesn't get absorbed as well as getting it certainly IV. There's topical sprays for it too, and the purpose of this is to help you detox, help support liver health. Everything you eat, all these toxins that are coming at us through our skin, through our food, through our water, are all getting metabolized through the liver. So glutathione helps with that. NAD helps your mitochondria perform better. Mitochondria are these little powerhouses within our cells that give us energy. Again, orally, you have to be careful of which forms are best and which get most absorbed. IV, it's great. You mentioned you had one. That's the quickest, most effective route. It's just not practical. You're not going to do that every day. But yeah, those are 2 very popular to get, either IV, topical with glutathione, but you can find glutathione in food like broccoli and a lot of natural ways to get that into your diet. But yeah, they're very popular, but I would strongly recommend both of them, as long as it's sourced, again, by a trusted supplement company. There's another drug, it's called N-acetylcysteine, which you could take before you go drinking to help prepare your liver for it. They give that to people with Tylenol overdoses. Because if you overdose on Tylenol, it'll destroy your liver. So they give you this, it's like an antidote, I guess you could say. But there is an antidote now. We ordered it. I think it's actually coming today. It's called Z-Biotic. If you drink, it neutralizes this chemical in your colon so that you don't get a hangover.
Yeah, when I got the NAD, I was kind of warned that I would feel almost high, and I've never actually been high myself. I'm not a smoker, but I remember instantly kind of feeling like this lifted feeling, and I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy how instant I felt that change. And
it's the energy, it's your cells. Your cells, the mitochondria specifically inside the cells, are working better. And you know, we talked about lifestyle before. You can improve your mitochondria, which is the little energy powerhouses of each cell, through lifestyle, like weight training, high intensity exercise, sauna, cold plunge, intermittent fasting. So adding NAD into that is helpful. Actually, there's a precursor NAD, it's called NMN or NR, but yeah, NAD, I mean, I think it's great. You just have to find one and see if it makes sense. The same thing, you're like, am I gonna take this forever? Well, maybe. Maybe work it into your routine like you would take a multivitamin.
Yeah, they suggested it as like a once a month kind of pick me up for someone like me. They said it's good for anti-aging, it'll show in your skin. So I haven't done enough of it yet to say whether or not I feel that kind of benefit from it, but I think it's something I'd like to explore. And for the people out there who smoke and maybe don't have the best lifestyle habits, you know, they mentioned to me that people who vape, it's a great way to offset the chemicals you're putting in your body through a vape pen, right? And that's another big thing. I'm seeing these young children absolutely addicted to vape pens, and it saddens me because I think they're being promoted as a better alternative than cigarettes. I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me, but at least if you're going to have those bad habits, you can take on something like NAD plus to offset, you know, what I think is the damage, you know, whether it be alcohol, cigarettes, whatever your toxin may be, these things can, it sounds like, at least reverse some of that damage.
Yeah, and there's many sort of antioxidant supplements, you know, that exist in the marketplace. Those two are very popular right now. And again, they're all going toward improving the cellular health at that level. Same thing with, you know, we mentioned the saunas, even red light therapy. That can really improve someone's mitochondria, improve their energy, improve their skin tone. You know, these things, you have to be consistent with them, but they work. They have these like red light masks you can put on, or these red light panels that you stand in front of. And I think it's a combination of doing those and building that into your routine. Now, most people aren't going to buy a red light panel for home, but there's all these places you could go. You go to Next Health, you could go to Restore. There's these chains that exist, certainly in LA, but everywhere, where you can start to at least try these modalities out, see what's right for you. But yeah, the supplement world is growing, and like almost every day or two I'll hear on a podcast, or I'll read about like a new supplement. And I myself, I mean, I might be up to like 16 or 7. I have to get under control because, you know, like, oh, I need this for that and this for something else. But do they work? Yeah, they work. It's just, you know, where's the end point?
Right. So you talked about optimizing sleep, which I agree. If I get anything less than 7 hours, I don't feel good anymore. When I was in my 20s, I could go to bed at 4 a.m. and be at work at 7 like a champ. You know, I'm 41 now. It's not the same. And I really try to prioritize sleep. And I take magnesium, which I do think really helps me fall asleep, stay asleep. I know when I was pregnant, I was a little magnesium deficient, I guess, and I was getting these leg cramps. So I read that magnesium was something that could help alleviate that. So I'm a believer, but I'm curious your take on what anybody listening can do to optimize their sleep.
Yeah, there are a number of things. I think where I'd first begin is when you wake up in the morning, getting sunlight. And I know, you know, that's the furthest you're thinking about from sleep, but it's very important at that point in the day, get direct sunlight into your eyes. I mean, don't stare into the sun, but get sunlight without sunglasses on, at least for 10 or 15 minutes. This light is going to help reset, turn off melatonin, which is sleepiness, and, you know, bring up your cortisol. That's one of the sort of key things that I think a lot of people don't do. And related to that is the more sunlight you get during the day, the easier it will be for you to fall asleep at night. And it's the things you do during the day. If you're very active and you're exercising, for example, people who exercise tend to sleep better. The most important, I would say, characteristic of developing good sleep hygiene, as it's called, good sleep habit, is going to bed at around the same time every night and waking up at around the same time every day, including the weekends. So if you go to bed really late one night, at least try to wake up the same time you would normally. This is going to help reestablish your circadian rhythm. We want to be active during the day when it's light out, and when it's dark out, asleep. That's just the way our body is. Ideally, when should someone go to bed? Technically, being asleep between 9 and 11. The reason for that is the deep sleep happens to us between 10 p.m. and around 1 or 2 a.m. The deep sleep, by the way, is where your brain detoxifies. This is where muscle growth happens, growth hormones are released, testosterone. This is where fat burning happens, all these hormones. It's all happening around 10 to 2. So people who routinely go to bed at like 12 or 1, they missed it. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's how the clocks work. If you go to bed at 12 or 1 and you're like lifting weights and working out, you're missing out on a lot of those advantages. And then the dream sleep, the so-called rapid eye movement, REM sleep, happens more like 2 a.m. to 6. So that's where like your thoughts and memories are consolidated. So if you're trying to learn something, people studying for school, things like that, emotions are consolidated. If you're waking up really early, say you wake up at 4 every day, well, you're missing out on that sleep. So, and I know not everyone can sleep from like 10 to 7, but that's probably an ideal window. And that's how the sleep cycles work. And if you had an Oura Ring or any of these trackers, it'll tell you how much time you spend in deep sleep. And it'll tell you how much REM sleep you got and how many times you woke up through the night. So it's very helpful. And it will also tell you like what has impacted your sleep. So as far as things to avoid before sleep, try not to eat at least 3 hours before bedtime, because all the food in the digestion elevates the core body temperature, and that prevents deep sleep, or prevents you from getting into sleep, because your body temperature has to drop at least 1 or 2 degrees. I wouldn't work out 2 hours before sleep. And then screens, phones, tablets, cutting that down about an hour or 2. Ideally, you shouldn't have a TV in the bedroom, but if you do, using like blue blocker glasses. I've been using these like yellow tinted, they're like sunglasses basically, to watch TV in bed. It looks kind of silly, but it really cuts down the blue light, because the blue light from fluorescent lights, it really cuts down the melatonin release from your brain. And there's certain plants you can have in the room that emit more oxygen and absorb CO2. And I think NASA has a whole list of plants they recommend, like the Boston fir, snake plant, is good to have in the bedroom. And then keeping it as cold as you can tolerate, maybe like 65, 66 degrees, keeping it as dark as you can, blackout shades, or a sleep mask. Earplugs in some cases, and keeping it as quiet as you can. As far as supplements, you mentioned magnesium, that's a good one. There's different forms of magnesium. There's magnesium glycinate, is a good one for sleep. Magnesium threonate as well. Melatonin is good, you just kind of have to find the right dose there. Melatonin is also a really strong antioxidant, so it has other benefits to it. Glycine, which is an amino acid. Glycine is a very good natural sleep aid, as well as myo-inositol. And these are all over-the-counter sort of supplements. I wouldn't recommend Ambien or any prescription medications. Studies have shown people who take Ambien have shorter lives.
And they sleepwalk and dial their exes.
It's just
Someone told me that,
it's not
and I was out.
I mean, if you needed to get through an acute episode in your life, or something like a day or two, but generally speaking, there's so many other natural things. There's all these like herbal teas and rhodiola extract. So there are lots of supplements, but I think the most important thing is your habit, your routine. Like, I'm going to go to bed at 10, I'm going to wake up at 6. But you need to get that 7 to 8 hours. A lot of people just think, I get by in 6. And they've done studies on it. Very few people can actually thrive on 6 hours.
Yeah.
It's just, you can't. And the sleep is so important that they've actually deemed like shift working a carcinogen. So, a lot of people work shifts, nurses, firefighters, police officers, they're at higher risk for dementia, heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, because they're not getting adequate deep sleep. That means their immune system isn't working well. If your immune system isn't working well, it's not able to kill off the little cancers that are sort of, popping up throughout our body. So same thing with dementia. You say, well, why do you get dementia? If you're not sleeping, your memories aren't getting consolidated. You don't have memory, higher risk of dementia. So all these things are sort of related. I mean, I think sleep could be the most important over nutrition, over exercise, over anything else. Because if you think about it, you can go a day without eating, you can go a day without exercise. Can you go a day without sleeping? Well, maybe. You'll be miserable. But
yeah, I did it when I had a kid.
Yeah.
And I was down for the count when I got home. I mean, that was birth was a lot in and of itself, and giving birth, and then just, being sleep deprived for 2 days before getting, home and then having to take care of a baby and rehabilitate yourself. It was really rough on me as a,
Yeah, and you have to prioritize it. And I think most people don't. They just think it's like, oh, I'll get some sleep later. And, I, as a surgical resident, I didn't really sleep much, in the late 90s to the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Being in residence, sleeping in hospitals, being on call. And that was like a sort of a badge of honor back then, but that's changed. You can't perform well as a doctor. You can't perform well really in any job. And they've done studies on athletes. The athletes, they prioritize that, take it very seriously, their sleep. LeBron James, all these big high-profile athletes, they're sleeping 8 to 9 hours. Their job depends on it, and their performance depends on it. And the ones, they've done studies with basketball players who didn't get enough sleep, had higher turnovers, missed more shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you're off. So don't discount sleep. I think it's really a non-negotiable that people say, oh, I'm going to sleep when I'm dead. Well, if you will die sooner if you don't sleep.
Don't take that mindset.
Yeah.
I'm interested in those glasses because I am guilty of getting in bed and I chase a toddler around before bed, wrestle with putting her to sleep, and then once she's out, I'm like, okay, phone time. And I know it's so bad for me, but I think at least if you are guilty of that as I am, these glasses I think are something.
Yeah, I mean, you could put them on even like after dinner, you're walking around the house. I mean, just having them on, there's several manufacturers out there, but basically they're cutting the blue light. So they're either yellow or orange tinted. And other things you can do in the home, like changing out some light bulb, like light bulbs in the bedroom should be more orange or red tinted. During the day, you want this blue light coming from overhead that keeps you awake. But as you get into the evening, if you go back into the, primitive ancient times, they're like fire coming from the ground. That's orange and red. So you don't want these overhead lights at night.
Right.
And that's the biggest problem is in culture, not just America. It's 8 o'clock at night and all the lights are on.
Right.
And they're blue lights. So that really is interfering with people's sleep. Not to mention all the, your computers and your Wi-Fi and all that. So the EMFs are something too that people shouldn't ignore. But at least people are talking about these things now. They didn't really know about this 5-10 years ago, but now it's, especially with sleep, and they're just scratching the surface with sleep. But yeah, I think sleep is more important than exercise or nutrition.
So we need to normalize walking around the house with these glasses on at night.
Kind of, or you can just change the light bulbs and keep the lights dimmed after a certain hour. We're coming up on daylight savings now. It's going to be getting darker soon. So again, your body is going to be in sync with your circadian rhythm. And technology has thrown us out of that rhythm. And because of that, our health has suffered. We got this grounding pad that we put on our mattress, and you plug it into the wall, and it changes the electricity in your body. So this is a device that you can add to your phone. It's from a company called Aries Tech. And what this does is it blocks all the electromagnetic radiation frequency that's coming from a cell phone. They have different sizes. They have some larger ones for a laptop or a computer. They have some that you can wear around your neck. They have larger ones that you can just sit at an area in your home. But I think it's useful, and I think there's a lot of science behind it. A lot of people don't believe in it because you can't see it. But I do think it's worth at least looking into it, because the amount of heat and radiation that comes from this, people are getting cancers and people are getting tumors in their brain from cell phones.
It certainly isn't going to hurt you to have it on there, right?
No.
Yeah.
And that I think is maybe $80
right.
for something like that. And I think it's worth taking some precautions.
Yeah.
It's just another toxin. The same way you don't want mercury in your food, you don't want the EMFs by your head when you're sleeping.
Seems like a good investment. So what do you think is a misconception about why so many people have heart disease?
So back in the 1950s, they couldn't prove, even though a study came out suggesting that countries who had higher amounts of fat in their diet, not only in the United States and other countries in Europe, they were correlated with a higher risk of death. And the study was very flawed, as it turned out many years later. And at that time, instead of promoting, proving that saturated fat, cholesterol was causing heart disease, this suspicion that maybe it was vegetable oils that were starting to appear. And around this time, the American Heart Association was formed, and they got a very large donation from Procter & Gamble at the time. Procter & Gamble was the maker of Crisco and these vegetable oils. And the arrangement was such that, could we say that vegetable oils are heart healthy, and that it truly is the saturated fat and that it is the cholesterol? And this is maybe around 1960. And that sort of myth propagated to this day. So this has been 60 years. This has been in all med school training. This has been, every doctor in the world will tell you, lower your cholesterol, don't eat, myself included. When I found out I had a high calcium score, I changed my diet, specifically around that, with red meat and cold cuts and things of that nature. Now, yes, cold cuts aren't good, but if you are going to eat meat, certainly have the organic, grass-fed, grass-finished meat. I think now, looking back with the knowledge I now have, and same with the eggs I mentioned, pasture-raised eggs, I think that's fine to do. It's the mass-produced meats that people still have to be careful of, because they're very processed, like sausage and bacon and ham and things of that nature. But nonetheless, I think what's getting more attention is that these so-called seed oils, which are vegetable oils, canola oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, these are the real culprits, because these have a lot of high polyunsaturated fats, and they get oxidized, and that's what's really injuring the coronary lining, the blood vessel lining, or the lining of all the vasculature in the body. And there's a lot of controversy if you look on social media now about this, but there's just growing evidence that over the last 50 years, what's contributed to deaths from heart disease, it's not the saturated fat, it's the tremendous rise in seed oils. And if you look, they have these charts that are published. There's a great book out, it's called Dark Calories by Dr. Kate Shanahan. She's an MD and a PhD in nutrition. And you see over the last 50 years, saturated fat stayed the same. Seed oils is markedly increased, along with deaths from heart disease, along with obesity, along with type 2 diabetes. So could we have got it wrong? Is it not saturated fat? Is it not cholesterol? It sort of looks that way.
Yeah, and I mean, just thinking about the Mediterranean diet, right? All these studies say that these people who follow the Mediterranean diet are eating good olive oils. They don't seem like they're having the challenges that we're having here in America, right? So right. I think it's a testament to what you're saying, that there's something wrong with the way these foods are being prepared and what we're taking in that's not happening other places.
Yeah, it's the degree of processing that's happening. And all these vegetable oils are just another form of processing. Almost any chip or packaged food you eat, if you read the ingredients, has vegetable oil in it. So it's not that you're intentionally pouring corn oil on everything, right. It's just in the foods. But the amount of fat and the type of fat you eat is what matters. So if you said, hey, I'm just going to avoid ultra-processed food, you'd probably be avoiding most, if not all, of these seed oils. Right. And therefore you'd be healthy and you'd lose weight and you'd have less risk of heart disease and so on. So that's something to consider, something to talk about with your doctor. But most of them don't know that. I'm just learning this now, and I'm not even an internal medicine doctor. I'm
right. Just passionate about your health. And
yeah.
Well, I hope you learned as much today as I did. I feel like I'm going to implement so many things that Dr. Bruno shared here today. We are going to link his longevity program. So if you'd like to sign up, I'll offer a discount code. You can really get into some personalized programs with Dr. Bruno. I'm also going to link my guide to how I personally lost 50 pounds after pregnancy. And we'll share links to many of the products that we reference in the videos as well. Thanks for coming by.